Good evening and welcome to my channel. Tonight we'll be reading Loveyard by Nicholas Leonard, read with permission from the author. When I looked down at my grandparents' headstone in the Loveyard while the breeze tickled the branches of the dogwood trees, I didn't see dates of birth or death. No, I saw one singular date shared beneath their names, July 4th, 1966. Have you been inside a cemetery where every tree has pink leaves? The Loveyard mostly had dogwood trees, but it also had the occasional towering pine tree. But the verdant green of these pine trees were so dark that they didn't affect the pink bushels up and down the acres of the Loveyard. They pointed up like black steeples, churches for gray squirrels and baby owls. Why was it odd that I found a headstone with my grandparents' names on it? Because they were still very much alive. What was even odder was that I knew that 1966 was the year they got married after a whirlwind romance that spanned mere weeks. The headstone next to theirs was in a similar style. 2 names, 1 date. No birth dates, no death dates. One singular date as though it triumphed over both birth and death. This neighboring headstone had October 31st, 1997 for its singular date. Did this neighboring couple get in a car crash coming home from a Halloween party? That's where my mind went to first, but that wouldn't make sense, seeing as my grandparents were still kicking and in good health for their age. I had gotten fired from working the grounds of Pine Grove Cemetery in Lynn, Massachusetts, because I kept falling asleep by the turtle pond, so I thought it was good to apply to this other cemetery in a region I will not disclose. This place has become so precious to me since I must maintain its secret. In fact, I'm pretty sure the job posting for a groundskeeper at the Loveyard was a mistake. My second reason for applying was how I found the name cute, it being a play on the word graveyard. I've since come to realize why I ever even got the job in the first place. How slowly I walked towards a singular conclusion, passing down aisles of headstones as though I walked down a tightrope. Every stone had 2 names, and 1 singular date. Singular. How modest yet triumphant every month appeared in Saint-Alphonse, and then those numbers which seemed to have conquered Roman numerals, and then the years like coordinates in space. It seemed as though something beyond us came to appreciate how we combine letters and numbers to pin a certain place in time, and whatever place and time that was masoned into every headstone had to be an incredibly important place in time. A place in time, the paramount of 2 people. What was this? I walked on, reading the names like characters in novels I'd never read. What was odd was how intact every headstone seemed to be. One headstone had an 1848 date on it, and it was just as gray and shiny as all of the others. I wondered if they had been so well kept by he who I succeeded, or if each headstone was composed of some indestructible, undirtying stone. Were these the toenails of Roman concrete that I passed? I think I only walked for so long because I was looking for a tombstone instead of a headstone, one stone that was a proper cemetery tombstone, but I found none. All of them were in identical fashion. 2 names, 1 date, 1 singular date. I had been tending to the Loveyard grounds for about a month when I noticed something incredibly odd. There was a lack of funerals. In fact, there had not been 1 funeral since I started working there. The dogwood trees did not change their leaves. Pink was such a stagnant color in the Loveyard. My vision became overly familiar with the pink of the dogwood trees and the dark grays and light grays of the headstones. There were no mausoleums, so the only indoor areas I had were the tool shed and restroom. I thought those who passed Loveyard's gates were mourners, but that theory simply didn't match with how every headstone had a singular date. So it was out of curiosity that I followed one couple through the sea of headstones one morning in early May. Hand in hand, they walked as though freshly out of church. Halos melted all over their bodies. She was a redhead with her orange hair being like a lost cousin of the pink of the dogwood trees, and he seemed of Greek or Italian descent with tan skin and black hair. She was in a dress too elegant to be a dress, but a dress that would have been great as a curtain in a drawing-room window. It was a crimson dress with olive gold flower pattern on it. He wore a light blue-collared shirt and khakis. They didn't see me slip out of the tool shed. They didn't see me stalk them, occasionally seeking shelter behind a dogwood tree. In lackadaisical descent, some petals fluttered down only for a jealous breeze to take them away from the couple. They were either unaware of the wind that stole their petals, or they just didn't mind. The Loveyard had so many dogwood petals to offer. I trailed them up until they stopped before a headstone with a dogwood tree nearby, its pink petals so light it barely created shade. Before the stone, their heads were tilting in amusement. I emerged. "Is that stone all right?" I called. They turned around with the boy answering jovially, "All right, it's got the correct date." I slowed my approach, muttering to myself, "Correct date?" He had his arm around the girl now, which he looked pleased to have over her shoulder like a fur. They had a look in their eyes that seemed as though they had seen the universe together. "And what date would that be?" I asked. "May 3rd, 2024, answered the girl. "That's a year ago today," I said. I heard the numbness in my voice, though I was not that embarrassed. For some reason, their presence assuaged me. "And what happened on May 3rd, 2024? They stopped and looked at each other, a snicker on their teeth. They looked back at me, pausing, and I was uncertain who would answer me. It was she who answered with a voice that she would have used to describe one of the nebulas that they saw when they saw the universe together. "That was the day he kissed me for the very first time. The day we had our first kiss." How could two sentences come down into my heart like one singular raindrop? I can't imagine the face that I made standing there. Whatever expression I was making didn't bother the couple. I think they treated me as they would have treated a minister who'd one day wed them. "I'll leave you two to your celebrations," I said with a bow while beginning to walk backwards. They nodded at me before returning to admire their names and that singular date on their headstone. I darted my eyes to the other stones throughout retreating. What continents the dogwoods took on in that moment. Their colors seemed able to glow as if pink lightsabers existed, and a sudden safety came over the Loveyard, as though the atmosphere took a massive and satisfying deep breath. I returned to my tool shed and realized how unbelonging it was among the headstones and dogwood trees. It seemed to have been plopped down there like Dorothy's house. I went inside, rummaged about my desk in search of the map on which I circled the plot my grandparents' headstone was in, found it, re-examined it, and bolted out of the tool shed. Throughout my run, some dogwood petals pirouetted down onto me like something a flower girl would throw. I was running like a best man who was late for the wedding. In fact, I was 59 years late. My grandparents had had their first kiss 59 years ago in 1966. I leapt down aisle after aisle of headstone, past every memorial of true love, almost tripping on my own velocity and excitement. Part of me wishes that that race through the Loveyard could have lasted forever. How triumphant the pink of the dogwood trees were when I rediscovered my grandparents' headstone. I was catching my breath, my smile such a poorly guarded net. No cemetery could compare, for here was the testimony of true love. Here was the evidence. I was the evidence. I was the evidence looking down into the other evidence. The lineage in which their love lives on, looking down at that singular date, July 4th, 1966. To keep myself from hysterics, I turned around and started reading the other headstones. But this did not keep me from hysterics, for I knew that the Reaper did not know the cemetery existed. The more far away the date, the more alive I felt the muscles in my face become. The more far away the love story, the more in awe I felt, the more victorious and happy I felt on behalf of humankind. What a beautiful place, pink dogwood trees, dove-gray headstones, singular dates. The next day, May 4th, 2025, was a Sunday morning, and I spent it with dogwood petals overpopulating my brain while I had tea with my grandparents, categorizing the tranquility of a smile with a sip of very hot tea. Thus ends Loveyard by Nicholas Leonard.